The first sound that cut through the boardroom that afternoon was a file hitting wood, hard, sharp, final. Then the lawyer's voice rose, raw with disbelief. He fired the architect of the system he just used. He fired her on his first day. No one answered him. The room was frozen. A tight ring of executives staring at Ethan Reese as if they had finally seen what had been sitting in front of them all morning. Ethan tried to sit taller, shoulders stiff, chin lifted, pretending the walls were not closing in on him. But his eyes darted first to the legal team, then to the board chair, then to the stack of documents that spelled out the mistake he refused to acknowledge. I listened from the hallway, my back pressed to the cool wall, hands trembling even though the anger in his voice was not aimed at me. My name echoed through the room like an accusation, but I was not inside. I was not invited. I was already gone. My name is Maren Harlow. For 8 years, I was chief architect at Nova Strand Systems. Today, I was escorted out of the building before lunch. I thought the worst part had been the moment Ethan looked me dead in the eye and said, "From now on, I run this company, you are done here." But as I stood outside the glass door of that boardroom, hearing them unravel the mess he created, I realized I had been wrong. That moment had not been the bottom. This was. The lawyer slapped another document onto the table. Her signature is on every compliance file, every deployment license, every audit trail. You bypassed legal obligations that protect this company. You cannot fire someone whose approval you need to operate. Chairs scraped. Someone cursed under their breath. Ethan muttered, "I don't need her. The team can handle it. The team cannot sign legal paperwork." The lawyer shot back, "Only the architect of record can." A silence followed that felt heavier than anything that happened to me that morning. I stayed where I was, invisible behind the door, listening as they spoke about me like a missing structural beam in a collapsing building. I had no idea yet just how far the collapse would spread. The memory of that morning still hits me like a shove between the shoulder blades. I had barely set my coffee on my desk when the internal announcement flashed across my screen, "Executive Leadership Transition Update." I remember whispering, "This is too early for surprises," just as Ethan Reese stepped into the hallway with the kind of strut that only comes from rehearsing in a mirror. He spotted me instantly. "Maren," he said, drawing out my name as if tasting it. "Big day for the company." I kept my voice steady. "I heard there were changes." He laughed a short, practiced sound. "Changes are necessary when a firm wants real innovation. You understand." I understood more than he realized. Years ago, at Helix Soft. I had guided him through basic architecture diagrams he claimed to understand but never did. There was a night when he pushed a deployment live without review, and I pulled him aside before it caused irreversible damage. He spent the following week avoiding me, unable to look me in the eye. His insecurity then was almost painful to watch. Seeing him now, wrapped in false confidence, dredged up memories I thought I had outgrown. He stepped closer. Nova Strand hired me to shake the dust off. Vision, speed, execution. That is what I bring, I replied quietly. Execution requires accuracy. His jaw tensed. Accuracy is overrated when you have momentum. Behind him, a few department heads appeared, drawn by the announcement. Ethan turned toward them, puffing his chest slightly. "Everyone, gather in the conference room. I will outline restructuring and technical redirection. Restructuring, technical redirection." Those words meant something very different when spoken by a man whose pride depended on proving he was no longer the junior engineer I once corrected. On the way to the conference room, he glanced back at me. The look was sharp, deliberate, almost triumphant, as if he had been waiting years for this moment. I walked behind him, trying to ignore the sensation building in my chest. Something about the way he carried himself felt practiced, like a performance designed for a single audience me. Ethan insisted on an all-hands meeting before the morning even settled. People were still carrying their first coffees when he stepped to the front of the conference room and clapped sharply, demanding attention. "Let us begin," he said, pacing as if the floor belonged to him. "This company needs direction. Clear, decisive direction. No more slow processes. No more outdated leadership habits." Someone from finance tried to ask about the restructuring memo, but Ethan cut him off with a raised hand. "Questions will come later. Right now, you listen." He scanned the room with a smug confidence that made my stomach tighten. Then his eyes landed on me. The shift in the air was immediate. "Marin Harlow," he said, voice ringing across the room. "Stand up." I felt dozens of heads turn. I stood slowly, keeping my breathing steady. Ethan folded his arms. "From now on, I run this company. You are fired." A sharp inhale echoed from somewhere near the back. A few hands froze mid-note. Someone dropped a pen. He leaned closer, savoring the moment. Hand over everything. "Now." My throat burned, but my voice did not break. "You want my badge and company equipment. That is all you are entitled to." His jaw twitched. "Do not play games. Hand over all architectural material." I held his stare. "Anything tied to my role as architect of record is protected under contract." "You know that?" Murmurs rippled across the room. Ethan's smile faltered for the first time. He waved dismissively. "Security will escort you." I placed my badge on the table, set down the laptop, and gathered the folders that belonged to the company. The documents with my signature stayed in my bag, untouched and legally mine. No one spoke as I walked toward the door. Some looked away. Some looked ashamed. All of it pressed on my chest as I stepped into the hallway, feeling the weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts behind me. In the quiet of the small storage room the company called a temporary off-boarding space, I opened my folder and slid out the contract I had signed 8 years earlier. My hands were still unsteady from the humiliation downstairs, but the words on the page steadied me. My title, Chief Architect of Record, sat in bold type. Every major deployment, license extension, integration, or investor demonstration required my written approval. No exceptions, no substitutes. Ethan had either skimmed this or never bothered reading it at all. My phone buzzed, and the screen filled with messages from coworkers. "I am so sorry. Marin, I did not know he would do that. Please forgive me for not speaking up." I typed nothing. My chest ached too much to form a reply. These were people I had trained, defended, covered for, believed in. Now they were afraid to even be seen helping me carry a box. I placed my coffee mug inside the cardboard crate, then my plant, then the framed photo of my sister, the one who had loaned me money when I first moved to Austin. A cold wave hit when I remembered rent, prescriptions, the rising insurance payments, humiliation mixed with a creeping fear I could not shake. Still, beneath all of that, there was a hard, steady truth. Ethan had no idea what he had torn down. I had spent my early career at Helix Soft watching a lead engineer steal credit for my code. I swore then that no one would ever take my work or my name again. That is why every blueprint, every compliance file, every approval gate carried my signature and not the company's. Another notification popped up, this one from the engineering group thread. Ethan's message cut through the screen. "We need a full system demo for the investors today. No delays. Run the new build immediately. No request for architectural approval. No legal clearance. No understanding of what those missing signatures meant." I closed the contract and placed it gently on top of my things, feeling the first threads of his recklessness pulling tighter around the company he thought he controlled. The first call came before I had even finished loading the last box into my car. My phone buzzed with a familiar name, Neil, one of the senior engineers who had been with me since the early prototypes. I answered on the second ring. His voice shook. "Marin, can you check your messages right now?" I unlocked my phone and saw a flood of system-generated emails piling into my inbox. Each subject line carried the same phrase architect of record authorization required. The timestamps were minutes apart, urgent, escalating. I opened one, and the alert expanded with a red banner stating that a deployment had been pushed live without proper review. They tried to run the build, I murmured. Neil exhaled sharply. Tried, they forced it. Ethan stood in our workspace and said we had 10 minutes to make it happen. In the background, I heard shouting, panicked voices, keyboards clattering, someone swearing loudly. Neil, what is happening over there? He lowered his voice as if afraid someone might hear. The moment we bypassed the approval gates, the system started locking down. API calls are failing. The new feature is looping. Dashboards in marketing are frozen. Operations cannot access any of the workflow tools. Another alert appeared on my screen. Then another. Then 10 more. I felt my pulse rise. Each alert meant a blocked function, a triggered safeguard, a record of unauthorized action tied directly to Ethan's command. Investors are arriving in less than 2 hours, Neil whispered. He said the demo had to run no matter what. I swallowed hard. Neil, the system is not malfunctioning. It is defending itself. Those approval gates exist for legal reasons. He was quiet for a moment. We told him. He did not listen. The next alert was labeled Escalation Level 2. That level only triggered when a deployment threatened contractual terms with major clients' terms worth more than $10 million. My fingers tightened around the phone. Ethan had not just crossed a line. He had detonated it. By early afternoon, another wave of alerts filled my inbox, each one louder than the last. Then Neil sent a short message. They pulled everyone into a boardroom. It is bad. Moments later, my phone lit up again. Ethan is blaming you. I did not go back inside the building. I simply stood across the street, close enough to see movement through the tinted glass, far enough to remain unseen. Inside, the meeting exploded almost immediately. Ethan's voice carried first. This is not my fault. The system has legacy issues. Marin slowed progress for months. I inherited a mess. A board member cut him off. We saw the dashboards melt down in real time. Are you saying our flagship product collapsed because of her? Ethan straightened his tie. Her processes were outdated. I am streamlining. Some resistance is expected. Another voice entered cold, controlled. The board's attorney, Mason Firth. Before we continue, I reviewed the contract files. He opened the folder with a deliberate motion. Chief Architect of Record Marin Harlow. Ethan's expression twitched. That is just a title. Mason slammed the file on the table. This title controls every deployment, every investor demonstration, every compliance audit. You executed a build that legally required her approval. A silence followed. Then Mason stood. You fired the architect of the system you just used. You did that on your first day. Someone from investor relations leaned forward. Are you telling us he bypassed every compliance gate tied to a contract worth more than $10 million? Ethan's voice cracked. You are overreacting. The team will fix it. The team cannot fix a legal breach, Mason replied. Nor can they sign architecture approvals in her place. That signature is not optional. The investors whispered among themselves, faces tight with alarm. The board members exchanged glances that no longer held patience. They were not looking for answers anymore. They were looking for accountability. And from the doorway, I could see the shift take hold. My absence had become the fulcrum of the entire disaster. My phone rang while I was still standing on the sidewalk, the boardroom windows reflecting a storm I no longer belonged to. I almost declined the call when I saw the number, but something in my chest tightened, and I answered. Marin. A calm voice said. It was Elaine Mercer, the board chair. We need to speak with you. Today. I kept my tone measured. About the system. About stabilizing the company. She replied. Can you come back inside? A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. I was escorted out less than 4 hours ago. Elaine exhaled, the sound strained. That was not our directive. Things have escalated. We are asking for your help. Help. I repeated quietly. Or absolution. She paused. I know you were mistreated this morning, but we cannot move forward without your expertise. The honesty in her voice cut deeper than the humiliation had. I looked down at the cardboard box at my feet. The sum of 8 years reduced to a handful of objects. Rent was due in 2 weeks. My medication refill was not cheap. Healthcare coverage would vanish at midnight. And somewhere inside that building, people I had trained were being shouted at for decisions they never made. I swallowed hard. I will consider assisting, but not under Ethan. Elaine hesitated. Removing a chief executive requires careful. I will not step inside a room he has authority over. A long silence stretched between us. Then she spoke. Lower, as if choosing her wording carefully. We have already begun internal discussions. His position is no longer secure. The shift landed like a stone. If you provide an external assessment, she continued, the board will use it to determine next steps. I will review the system logs from home. I said, nothing more for now. Thank you. Marin, she answered softly. You may have just given us the path out of this. Her words lingered long after the call ended. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, the system logs stretching across the screen in long lines of time-stamped truth. Every override command carried Ethan's authorization. Every forced deployment showed his insistence, and every blocked approval gate highlighted the exact places where my signature should have been. Neil called me once, voice low. He made us do it. Marin. He said if we questioned him, we were resisting progress. I know, I said quietly. I can see it in the logs. The deeper I dug, the clearer the picture became. Unauthorized escalations. Security bypass attempts, deployment launches without compliance review, even a recorded instance of Ethan rewriting a commit note to make it appear he had contributed to the architecture. I compiled everything into a structured report, facts only. No emotion. Then I added the old HelixSoft entry I had never erased from my private notes the night Ethan tried to push broken code to production, and I stopped him minutes before a total system collapse. It was not revenge. It was context. A pattern. Elaine called as soon as the board received my file. We need you to listen, she said. She put the phone on speaker. I heard Ethan shouting in the background. She is lying, he barked. Those logs can be faked. The engineers misunderstood my instructions. Mason, the attorney, answered him with a calm blade of a voice. The logs came directly from the core servers. They matched the timestamps of your access card and workstation. Someone else added. You told us you had led architecture teams before. These records show otherwise. Papers rustled. Chairs shifted. The weight of evidence pressed down until Ethan's voice cracked. She always made me look incompetent. Ever since HelixSoft, she wanted this. No, Ethan, Elaine said. You did this to yourself. A vote followed. Unanimous. Immediate suspension, with removal pending legal review. The call disconnected, leaving only the quiet hum of my apartment and the undeniable truth of what the audit had revealed. 2 days after the board suspended Ethan, Elaine called again. This time her tone was clipped, almost businesslike. The Regulatory Technology Commission has requested your full report. We have already forwarded the logs. I felt the breath leave my chest. They are opening an investigation. They have begun one, she said. His decisions crossed into professional misconduct. They want statements from everyone involved. By that evening, the commission had reviewed the logs, the forced overrides, the compliance violations, and the false authorship claims. Their determination arrived less than 24 hours later. Ethan's professional credential would be suspended indefinitely, pending a longer inquiry. It was the kind of censure that followed a person for life. Industry chatter spread fast. Neil texted me. People are saying no company will touch him now. Another message came from a former colleague. He tried to blame you in an interview. They laughed him out of the room. The next morning, Ethan attempted to call me. When I declined, he sent a string of messages. You ruined me. You always wanted control. Please. I need to explain. Marin, I am begging you. I blocked the number. Instead, I focused on the assessment I owed the board. My laptop screen glowed as I laid out a technical roadmap detailing how to stabilize the core architecture, restore the approval gates, and rebuild client trust. It took hours of concentration to shape it into something the company could use without falling back into chaos. When Elaine called about the final document, I stated my terms clearly. If I assist going forward, it must be as an independent overseer. No executive, including the next chief executive, will have authority over my architectural decisions. Silence landed on the line, followed by a steady breath. Those conditions are reasonable. Marin. I sent the final file before midnight, the cursor blinking one last time as the company braced itself for whatever came next. Elaine called early the next morning and asked me to come in. Her voice carried a steadiness that had not been there before. The kind that follows a decision no one can walk back. When I stepped into the boardroom, every seat was filled. No one avoided my eyes this time. Elaine gestured for me to sit. We have reviewed your terms, she said. After consulting with legal, we are creating a new role, Independent Technical Ethics and Architecture Overseer. You will report directly to the board. No chief executive will have the authority to override your approvals. A murmur moved through the room as she continued. This position exists because the company failed to protect its core systems. We are correcting that failure. If you accept, your authority will be higher than any executive on the technical chain. I set my bag on the table. I will not return as an employee. I said, not after what happened. You will not be an employee. Mason added, your contract defines you as a legally independent authority. Your work belongs to you. The relief that moved through me was quiet but sharp, a release I had held back since the moment Ethan told me to hand over everything. When I walked back through the halls, people who looked away days earlier stepped toward me. Neil shook my hand, eyes bright with something that looked like relief. You deserved this long before now, he said. I thanked him and continued on until I reached the empty auditorium. The same space where I had stood while Ethan tore my career apart now felt strangely still. I touched the back of one chair, letting the silence settle. I had never needed revenge. I had only needed the truth to be seen. My new office was small, tucked beside a server review room, but the key in my hand felt heavier than anything I had carried out of the building that day. I closed the door behind me, knowing that for the first time, the narrative was mine alone to shape. At exactly 12:03 in the morning, while I was juggling a cascading multi-state production failure from my terminal in Fort Collins, my phone buzzed with a message that carved my life cleanly in two. You do not need to come in tomorrow. 7 words. A firing at midnight. Right in the middle of a crisis. Only I understood. I stared at the screen, my breath tightening. A second earlier, I had been on a call with a night supervisor in Cheyenne, talking him through a calibration mismatch. Hold that sequence for 30 seconds. I had said, trying to buy the system enough time to recover. Now my voice caught. Jace, I'll call you back. He paused. Marin, what happened? Nothing you can fix, I said, and ended the call before the tremor in my throat gave me away. The machinery alerts kept chiming through my headset, overlapping voices and warnings, but all I could hear were those 7 words marching across my screen. My boss, Conrad Greer, was not a man who sent impulsive messages. A midnight dismissal was not a mistake. It was a decision someone had planned with precision. A second notification lit up beneath the first, a forwarded chain. My name, highlighted. A timestamp from earlier that evening. The subject line read, Transition Plan Execution. My chest tightened. They had been preparing this while I was stitching their grid back together. timing one facility against another like a surgeon aligning arteries. I steadied myself, forcing air into my lungs. A voice message arrived next, from Celeste Harwood. Operations will proceed under the new model immediately. All access should be disabled by morning. Her tone was clean, crisp, final. I did not reply. Instead, I sat perfectly still, my hands cold, aware that the system I had held together for 11 years was already sliding toward the edge. My absence was not going to slow the collapse. It was going to expose it. By sunrise, every financial outlet in Colorado would report the same thing: a $5 billion empire had fallen in the dark, and I would be the only one who understood why. I shut the terminal down, knowing the past 11 years were no longer mine to carry, and walked away from the screen that had defined my life as the long night continued to unravel behind me. I stayed awake long after the crisis alerts stopped pinging in my ears, letting the quiet press against me. 11 years of work does not disappear because someone sends 7 words at 12:03 in the morning. But that is exactly what they wanted: clean, silent erasure. When I first joined Iron Veil, I was 28 and still learning the rhythms of the grid. Back then, the night supervisors treated me like a temporary patch. "You will burn out in 6 months," one of them joked. I answered, "Only if you stop calling me when things go wrong." They didn't, and I never burned out. I adapted. For years, I mapped every quirk of every facility: the robotics timing in Utah that drifted by half a second when the line chief swapped shifts, the humidity-sensitive composite molds in Wyoming, the early deliveries from the metals supplier in New Mexico that always required me to adjust the calibration window manually. No algorithm flagged those variables. They were invisible unless you lived inside them long enough to feel their pulse. I remembered sitting across from Conrad Greer once, watching him gesture proudly at a performance chart. "Look at this stability." "Marin," he said, "the system practically runs itself." I had smiled politely. "It runs because the timing stays aligned." He chuckled. "Exactly. Beautiful engineering." He never asked who kept the timing aligned. He never wondered why the same 5 facilities behaved like they shared a single brain. He liked the numbers, not the labor beneath them. Later that night, I called Jason Cheyenne to check a curing sequence. "You always know something before the alerts do," he said. "I just listen," I told him. "Not everyone listens the way you do," he replied. And I heard something almost like concern in his voice. I let the memory settle, the weight of it heavier now that I was no longer part of the grid. 11 years spent stitching threads they never saw, holding a system together that believed it was holding itself. And sometime before dawn, I realized how easy it had been for them to forget the hands behind their stability. Celeste Harwood arrived on a Thursday morning, introduced with the kind of polished confidence that filled the room before she even spoke. Conrad brought her into the operations meeting with a hand on her shoulder, the gesture of a man showing off a new trophy. "This is Celeste," he said. "She will help modernize our coordination framework." She extended her hand toward me. "You must be Marin. I have heard you handle the legacy processes." The way she said legacy felt like a diagnosis. "I handle the cross-facility timing," I replied. Celeste offered a thin smile. "For now." She took the seat beside Conrad, already opening a tablet covered in diagrams and projections. During the meeting, she pointed at one of her slides. "These redundancies slow us down. Automated protocols can manage these touchpoints without needing individual oversight." Her eyes flicked to me. Non-scalable roles become bottlenecks under growth pressure. I leaned forward. "Those redundancies prevent multi-state timing failures. The system adjusts because someone identifies drift before it becomes instability." Celeste folded her hands neatly. "Machines do not drift. Data drifts when humans interfere with it." Jace, sitting across the table, shifted uncomfortably. "With respect, Celeste, Marin has caught issues the dashboards never flagged." She cut him off. "Because the dashboards have not been properly leveraged." She clicked to another slide. Our goal is to eliminate manual decision layers entirely. Conrad nodded as if she had spoken scripture. After the meeting, I stayed behind to gather my notes. Celeste paused in the doorway. You seem very attached to your methods. They keep the grid alive, I said. Or they keep it stuck in the past. She stepped out without waiting for my reply. Later that evening, while preparing a briefing, I stumbled across a file on the shared drive unsecured, poorly hidden. Operational streamlining. Phase 2. I opened it and saw my own role listed under a heading labeled Planned Sunset Positions. No explanation, no transition plan, just a bullet point under a graph. I closed the file slowly, feeling the shift beneath my feet. The decision had already been set in motion long before anyone bothered to tell me. The night of the firing had begun the same way most crises did, 3 calls at once. 5 supervisors talking over each other, and a timing cascade spreading from Utah to Wyoming before anyone understood why. I was elbow deep in the sequence models, trying to slow the drift long enough for Cheyenne to catch up. When my phone lit up beside the keyboard, it was that same message. You do not need to come in tomorrow. I whispered it out loud, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something else. They didn't. Jace came through my headset again. Marin, Salt Lake is asking if they should pause the actuator run. They said they cannot get Denver to respond. My throat tightened. Tell them to hold. I will get back to you. Before I could mute the line, a new notification popped up. A text from Lucas, one of the junior engineers in Boise. They think you are holding us back. I stared at his words, my fingers hovering over the screen. Who I typed. His reply came instantly. Celeste. She told Greer the system will stabilize once your manual interference stops. Manual interference. 11 years of work reduced to 2 words. I closed my eyes as another alarm echoed through the headset. Jace again, voice strained. Marin. We need the offset values. Everything is slipping. I swallowed hard. Jace. I cannot give directions tonight. What does that mean? It means decisions were made, I said quietly, not by me. He was silent for a long moment before muttering, then they do not know what they just did. I ended the call and set the headset down, letting the room go still around me. Celeste and Conrad had chosen this moment mid-crisis, mid-chaos because they believed their new system could take over instantly. They had cut the wrong wire, and I knew the break would not be slow. I logged out without ceremony. No warnings, no alarms, no dramatic final command. Just a quiet confirmation window and the soft click of the key. For the first time in 11 years, the grid no longer had my fingerprints on it. Within minutes, alerts began stacking across my muted screen like old ghosts refusing to stay buried. Parameter mismatches, calibration drift, sequence skips. The same issues I had caught hundreds of times before, except now they were accelerating with no one intercepting them. My phone buzzed. A message from Raymond, the facility lead in Flagstaff. Denver is not answering. Did something happen? I stared at his text until it blurred. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, but I did not respond. I was out. That was the choice they made. Another alert pulsed. This one from Cheyenne, the curing window had failed to sync with Salt Lake. Then another Boise's assembly queue rejecting input data. In the past, I would have been juggling 5 calls at once, patching holes before anyone even felt the draft. Tonight, I sat completely still, letting the silence press into my chest. A call from Jace flashed across the screen. I declined it. Then a second time. I declined that too. The third time he left a voicemail that came through shaky and tight. Marin, something is wrong. The offsets are not triggering. It looks like someone deleted the manual backups. We cannot reach Denver. Please tell me you are on your way. I set the phone face down on the table. It buzzed again anyway. A week earlier, Celeste had claimed the automated protocols would eliminate human error. Now, those same protocols were skipping the adjustments that kept 5 states moving in rhythm. A final alert lit up Flagstaff reporting a full stop in their renewable assembly line. The first cracks had opened, and they were spreading faster than anyone inside the system could see. By morning, the grid had torn itself apart. I woke to my phone vibrating non-stop news alerts, missed calls, frantic messages from people who had never contacted me outside scheduled briefings. A breaking report played automatically when I tapped a notification. Multiple facilities across 5 states have halted production. Early estimates suggest losses could reach $5 billion. Another anchor cut in. Federal inspectors have arrived at the Denver headquarters. Leadership has not released a statement. My phone lit up again, this time with a message from Jay Salt Lake is down. Cheyenne is shutting everything off before the materials warp again. This is bad. Marin. I typed nothing. Within seconds, another message popped up. Raymond from Flagstaff. Celeste is issuing 3 different directives at once. No one knows which one to follow. Then a screenshot came through, a memo stamped the night before. Subject information bottlenecks issue. Marin Calloway has been hoarding operational knowledge, preventing full automation. My stomach knotted. They had written the narrative before the collapse had even begun. A call from headquarters lit my screen next. It was Conrad Greer. I let it ring until it died. The voicemail that followed was tight and rehearsed. Marin. We are experiencing a temporary disruption. We may need clarification on certain procedures. Please call me temporary. He said it like the system was merely having a bad morning, not bleeding out in real time. More alerts rolled through Boise, shutting down its assembly queue. Pueblo's metal shift overheating. Flagstaff reporting incompatible inputs from 3 facilities. Each message struck with the same brutal clarity. 11 years of precision, thrown aside overnight. And now the pieces were falling exactly where I had known they would. By the time the 10th alert came in, the grid was gone, fractured beyond repair, and no command from Denver could stitch it back together. Conrad Greer called right after noon. I let the phone ring until his name blurred on the screen. But he called again, and again. On the 3rd attempt, I answered. His voice cracked before he finished the first sentence. Marin, thank God. We need your help. The grid is unstable across all 5 states. Celeste's protocols are not compensating. No one can get the timing realigned. I held the phone to my ear without speaking. The silence made him breathe heavier. We made a mistake, he said. Quieter, a serious one. Whatever differences we had, we can address later. Right now, we need you back in Denver. We need you to walk us through recovery. I closed my eyes. The same man who told me the system ran itself was now choking on his own words. A new email banner slid across my screen. From Celeste Harwood, subject request for collaboration. I opened it. Marin, I believe there may have been miscommunication. Your experience is essential. If you could join us temporarily, I will ensure proper acknowledgement. Please let me know how we can proceed. Miscommunication. That was her word for 11 years erased by a midnight text. Conrad kept talking. Just tell us where to start. What should we fix first? I answered slowly. I do not work there anymore. Marin, please. His voice broke entirely. We are past ego. This is survival. Name what you want. We will honor it. Before I could respond, another notification appeared, this one from an unknown address. Federal Coordination Oversight Division. Inside was a single line. We would like to speak with you regarding the events leading to the system failure. Your insight is critical. Critical. The word hung in the air between all 3 messages. Conrad spoke again, terrified. Marin, please tell me you are still there. I stayed silent long enough for him to understand that the balance of power had shifted. When I finally ended the call, it was without negotiation. They were the ones falling now, and the consequences were already larger than any of them had imagined. 2 weeks after the collapse, I walked into Aspen Meridian for my first day. The building was smaller, quieter, nothing like the glass and steel command center in Denver. But the difference hit me the moment I stepped into the operations wing. Rowan Beck, the director of systems strategy, greeted me with a handshake that did not feel rehearsed. Marin Calloway, he said, we are grateful you chose us. We want to hear everything you know, not the polished version your version. I blinked. You actually want the messy parts. That is where the real intelligence lives, he replied. Show us. It was the first time in years that I felt my shoulders loosen, even slightly. He introduced me to the operations team, 7 engineers, young but sharp-eyed. One of them, Riva Morales, slid a chair toward me. We read your interview notes, she said. If even half of what you described is true, we need to rethink our entire model. I sat down with them, pulling up the diagrams I had rebuilt from memory. As I walked them through the old grid, its strengths, its dangerous blind spots no one dismissed, minimized, or rushed me. Riva pointed to a timing chart. This dip right here. Is this what you said caused the curing mismatch in Wyoming last year? Yes. She glanced at Rowan. Their automation model does not compensate for environmental drift. Rowan exhaled. So the failures were baked in long before the collapse. I nodded. There were vulnerabilities no one wanted to acknowledge. Another engineer, Thomas, tapped his screen. Look at this. Their predictive module has a flaw in the variance thresholds. If this had hit in peak season, they would have lost twice as much. Rowan turned back to me. You tried to warn them. I did, I said quietly. They argued the data was perfect. Data without the person interpreting it is blind, Rowan answered. That is why you are here. For the first time in a long while, I felt something like steadiness take root. Not vindication, something steadier. A place where the mind behind the system was not an inconvenience, but the foundation. The findings were released on a gray Wednesday morning. I was at Aspen Meridian reviewing a timing draft with Riva when my phone vibrated with an alert from the Federal Coordination Oversight Division. She glanced at me. Is that it? I opened the document. Yes. They finalized the report. Rowan joined us, folding his arms as he read over my shoulder. The summary was blunt and merciless. Celeste Harwood falsified readiness data to accelerate implementation. Conrad Greer approved untested automation despite documented concerns. Multiple safety controls were removed to meet quarterly targets. Riva let out a low breath. They put that in writing. They did, I said. A second alert followed. The board at Iron Vale had removed both Conrad and Celeste from their positions effective immediately. Their statements to the press sounded hollow, even in text. Conrad claimed he had trusted the wrong projections. Celeste insisted she had believed in innovation. Neither mentioned the people who lost their jobs or the grid that collapsed under their decisions. Rowan shook his head. Their credit rating just dropped again. Partners are pulling out. Riva tapped another update. 3 major clients dissolved contracts. They are finished. As the news spread, an email arrived from the investigators. Request for voluntary expert testimony. They wanted me to walk them through the system as it was before the collapse and explain where it failed afterward. Rowan asked softly. Do you want to do that? I closed the report and set my phone down. I will tell them what happened. Nothing more. Nothing less. Riva studied my face. No anger. There is nothing left to fight, I said. The truth already did the work. Later that afternoon, I sat across from 2 federal officials in a quiet conference room, speaking plainly about the timing drifts, the missing offsets, the warnings ignored. They wrote everything down. They did not interrupt. When we finished, one of them said, Thank you, Ms. Calloway. This clarifies more than you know. I nodded, feeling that familiar ache in my chest ease just a little. Truth had its own gravity, and it no longer rested on me alone. The final outcome came quietly, without headlines or dramatic statements. A short notice from the Federal Coordination Oversight Division arrived in my inbox one morning as I prepared to meet Rowan's team. Celeste Harwood and Conrad Greer are barred from holding operational leadership roles for 10 years. I read the line twice. It did not thrill me. It simply landed where it belonged. Rowan stepped into my office. You saw the update I did. He leaned against the doorway. Their reputations collapsed faster than the grid. I closed the email. They built their careers on certainty. They never considered the cost of being wrong. Rowan nodded slowly. You gave your testimony with more restraint than I expected. There was no reason to twist the knife. I said, the truth already did what it needed to do. Later that afternoon, I sat with Riva and Thomas as they finalized the draft of the new coordination model, one built around human judgment supporting automation, not the other way around. The National Manufacturing Alliance had requested a full presentation. Riva turned her chair toward me. They want you to lead the keynote. I blinked. Me, you, she said. You are the one everyone trusts. Rowan joined us, placing a folder in front of me. They mean it. Marin. Companies across 4 states want guidance. They do not want perfect data. They want someone who understands why data fails. I opened the folder slowly. Plans, invitations, and proposals spilled out everything Iron Veil had dismissed me for, now offered as something valuable, something essential. That evening, I stepped out into the hallway, letting the hum of conversation fade behind me. I remembered the night I was fired, the silence after the message, the sense of being cut loose from everything I built. Now the world was asking me to help build something better. When an industry reporter called for a quote, I answered without rehearsing anything. They removed me because they believed the system did not need a human mind. I said, but the collapse proved the opposite. Human judgment is not a flaw. It is the backbone. I ended the call and looked out across the city Fort Collins, glowing steady in the dusk, ready to begin the next chapter on my own terms.